Hello everybody and welcome back to the Rugby Dummy podcast hosted by me, Mark Flaherty. Before I get into today's topic, I am going to thank everyone who listened to the first episode of my podcast. If you're returning, thank you so much for listening. I received a lot of positive feedback from the podcast, so I am continuing on. I plan to continue on anyway, but I just want to say a big thank you to everyone, who inspired me to do this and everyone who is currently listening. So, thank you to everyone. Now, to get on to today. If you don't know me, my first love in rugby will always be Connacht Rugby. I adore Connacht Rugby, and although there's a Lions test and a Lions series going on, forget that for a minute. Let's ignore that elephant in the room, because I'm going to go back and talk about Connacht Rugby for a minute or two. Just because, as I've already mentioned, Connacht Rugby always comes first for me. As much as I love the Lions, as much as I love the Irish rugby setup, Connacht usually tends to come first for me. And there's been big developments in Connacht over the last, couple of weeks. Obviously the appointment of Stuart Lancaster, which is what today's podcast is going to be about. Stuart Lancaster. I'm going to be looking back at his entire career. I'm going to be looking at the rise, the brief fall and rise again of Stuart Lancaster and see, just try and understand what kind of coach he will be for Connacht and just show all the achievements he has got in the past. And just, kind of evaluate what he can do for Connacht. Or what he can hopefully do for Connacht, at the very least. So I suppose it makes sense to start at the very beginning. William Stuart Lancaster is an English rugby union coach and former player. Obviously, you knew these facts. However, I actually didn't know his first name was William. I just thought it was Stuart. Not that that matters, but I don't know. I feel like Stuart works a lot better for him, to be fair. It rolls off the tongue better than William Lancaster. So, that's the first win for Lancaster of his career there, going by Stuart rather than going by William. So, he has managed many sides. Those sides include, and, well, I was about to say are not limited to, but they are actually limited to it because that's, how it works. So, he coached Lead Tykes / Carnegie. He was the head of elite player development in the RFU. He was head of the England Saxons, or as they're known now, the England A side. He was then head coach of England, then head coach of Leinster. Oh, sorry, he was not head coach of Leinster. He basically was, lads. Let's not beat around the bush here. A lot of the ideas Leinster had for that positive spell came through Lancaster rather than Cullen. I will die on that hill. Anyway, he was a senior coach at Leinster. He's then at Racing 92, and he's now at Connacht. Interesting. So, he was a player though. He was a player before he was a coach. So, let's look at that. Let's look at him as a player. So, he did start off playing league. He then moved to union, where he mainly played as a flanker. So, his playing career, he started playing for Headingley or FC in 91. They then merged with Roundhay or UFC. So then Lancaster decided to join the newly formed Leeds RFU. They were part of the Premiership, the brand new Premiership formula and programme in England, which still stands today, just with less teams because of the financial bother within the Premiership at the minute. That's where he played for the rest of his career. He played at Leeds RFU until he was forced to retire in a freak accident, essentially. So, when I say a freak accident, he was in training one day with the teenage player Tom Palmer. Stuart Lancaster was holding a tackle bag and Tom Palmer was running off him. There was a big hit. I don't know how it happened. However it happened, Stuart Lancaster's hamstring ended up getting torn clean off the bone. This, of course, put an end to his playing career at the age of 30. This was, of course, I'd imagine devastating to Lancaster. However, it did allow him to get a foothold into coaching a lot quicker. It was, it was a really unfortunate way to end your career, and it happens a lot more than maybe people tend to remember. Accidents like that in training and on the field, and it's probably just really sad to have your career ended like that off the field. You don't get one last performance, but not everyone gets fairy tale endings, and especially in a highly physical sport like rugby, it is very rare that you would, get the ending that you want. And I think Lancaster knew that. I think everyone knew that. And, he It's nice to know he holds no better feelings towards Palmer. It was a freak accident. There's nothing he can do. So, he did not waste time getting into coaching. He quickly went from retiring to a year later, he was head coach of the Leeds or FU Academy. So, according to everyone in that academy and in Leeds or UFC in general, he was a fantastic coach for them. And after 4 years in charge of the academy, he was upgraded to take over as the head coach of Leeds Tykes when they were relegated from the Guinness Premiership in 2006. Now, when they were relegated to the National Division 1, he got them promoted with 122 points. This victory as well was without high-profile players that had played for Leeds, such as Justin Marshall and Ian Balshaw. Now with them back in the top division English rugby competition, Leeds Carnegie was the renamed title of the club. I don't know why it was renamed. It's not really relevant to what I'm talking about regardless. But with the name change, they were still Leeds. They did remain bottom of the table for the whole season, only getting 2 victories from 22 and were relegated again. Now, the thing about this was, in fairness, Lancaster didn't have the players available to him that other Premiership sides did at the time. So, although it was a pretty poor turnaround, I still don't blame that fully on him, to be honest. Now, he later departed the club after this season in 2008. It wasn't long after he left his role with Leeds, though, that he became the head... Well, actually, sorry, there's a few titles in this now. So, he's the England Saxons and head coach of elite player development. So, that entailed him overseeing, obviously, the development of elite players, but also overseeing the under-20s and the England Saxons. The England Saxons, or the England A, which they'd be known now. There used to be more official competitions back in the day for A sides, where there'd be cups to compete from. And that is where the Churchill Cup comes in, where, terrible name, don't like Churchill. Anyway, the Churchill Cup was, it was kind of like where these A sides, or less developed sides, would play each other in a competition and get a small cup out of it. It was great for development. Now, I don't believe the money was there for it to keep going, as well as the interest from a lot of teams, so it was disbanded. But Lancaster overseen 2 wins in the Churchill Cup in 2008 and 2010 for England, which, again, it was kind of trivial, but still big victories at the time, It was the first kind of thing that Lancaster had won as a coach. He also overseen big victories for the England under-20s team, which included a Grand Slam victory during the 2011 Six Nations Under-20 Championship. He's got a lot of good rep around England there when he was the head coach and, the elite player development officer. Not when he was head coach, but head coach of the Saxons and the Under-20s and kind of helping them out there. This was exactly what England needed, because when Martin Johnson was head coach of England in 2011 at that World Cup, I don't know if many of you remember, but England had lots of woes. Lots and lots of woes. They were getting lots of trouble with the law. They were doing lots of silly stuff. And overall, this is not going to be controversial when I say it, Martin Johnson is a very, very poor coach. He was not a good coach, and he could not control his players. His tactics were off. He didn't seem particularly nice in interviews. Just not a good coach. And I think he rightly left the role. Well, he was sacked, but he should never have got to that World Cup as a head coach, because it was genuinely embarrassing. As embarrassing as 2015? Maybe not. We'll get on to that in a minute. But in terms of the way the players were carrying themselves, it definitely was. There was certain players, I believe Ashton was one, and there's 2 others that apologised to a female worker in the hotel they were staying at for inappropriate comments. They were bungee jumping, they were out drinking in pubs days before matches. It was silly stuff, like silly cultural stuff, when you should be, at the highest sport level, leave that kind of crack at the gate. And Johnson didn't do anything to get rid of this. He was just a bit of a bullshitter, for lack of a better term there. But anyway, Lancaster was brought in because of the cultural shift that he had done with his work as the elite player development officer and head coach, right? He'd done lots of work there. So when he was announced as the head coach of England, yes, they didn't achieve a whole lot in this time there. and it's looked back as a failure, and it was a failure. There's no beating around the bush there, right? It was a failure because England failed to get out of the groups at a home World Cup, which is embarrassing. But the work he did around bringing culture, respect, and just nuance back to England camps was very, very important. And that's one thing I think people tend to forget about his tenure and what he does as a head coach. He brings a kind of hope and a kind of discipline with his players that just work, that just get these players on the right track when maybe they've been falling off it. Good examples of this is he left Danny Care out of the 2012 Six Nations Championship because of, poor run of games and just disciplinary issues, as well as off-field issues, I believe. And Lancaster said, I'm not having any of that, and left him out, which was controversial at the time, because we all know how good a player Danny Care was. Then in the World Cup, he left Manu Tuilagi out of the preparations. Now this is because Tuilagi was known for, he got fined in the 2011 World Cup because he had a sponsorship on his mouthguard, which went against the sponsorship rules in the World Cup, and in World Rugby, you cannot sponsor stuff that is not officially on a jersey, as far as I know, which he did, then got fined £4,000 for it. I don't know, was that playing any part into his omission of Tuilagi, that and his disciplinary issues as well? He was in the World Cup squad eventually, but he was left out initially, maybe because he was cop yourself on. He did a lot of stuff like that. However, Lancaster did do a lot of kind of bad stuff as well. For example, his centre combinations for England were always inconsistent, and he couldn't seem to focus on just getting two nailed down. This uncertainty and just, lack of, cohesiveness really let England down. As well as, he had no open side. He didn't specialise or develop an open side flanker for England, which really let them down as well in that World Cup. Everything let them down in that World Cup. But the thing was, they needed a cultural change, and I think the work that he done with the players in his time there catapulted the, instant success of England the minute Eddie Jones took them over. As you know, as we all know, Eddie Jones is not a cultural coach, is he? He's a winner. That's all he cares about. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to win a lot for a man who talks about it. Well, that's a lie. He has won a lot earlier in his career. His later jobs, though, he doesn't seem to have done that, has he? In my opinion, I think he's a bit of a spoofer. He's a good coach. Spoofer's harsh, but I just think his tactics have been found out, and it just seems like Eddie Jones was a good fit with England originally, but it just turned toxic and sour, as all his relationships with these clubs do. Clubs or countries that he's coached. Now, Lancaster, on the other hand, had a very positive impact on the players. I don't think any of the players in England really have much bad stuff to say about him. However, that did not translate to success, and in the world of sport, all that matters is success. That is the long and short of it. If you're not successful in your time there, you won't be remembered fondly. And that is why he's often said to be the worst England head coach. I don't think that's true. I really don't think that's true. I think just the coaches around him didn't, they were all young, all inexperienced, and it just didn't work out. But I guess it isn't all his fault, look at the coaches around him as well. Graham Rowntree and Andy Farrell, both of them went on to do exceptional things. Andy Farrell is the current Ireland head coach. He has overseen 2 Six Nations victories, one including a Grand Slam. He has overseen, that's, I was about to say something about a World Cup, that's not a good idea. But he's brought this Ireland to success. He's seen a Test series victory over in New Zealand, which was impressive. No one does that to the All Blacks. Well, they didn't at the time anyway. And what else has he done? He has done lots of stuff with Ireland. Graham Rowntree, seen lots of success with Munster in a short time there. So these are good coaches, It's not like they were flown in out of nowhere. And it just didn't seem to work out, really. But in general, it could have been a lot worse, that's results-wise, it couldn't have been a lot worse than that World Cup. But I think a lot of people did like the positive vibes he brought to England. But to move on from England, there actually was a few big victories he made there, he got a victory over the All Blacks in 2012, I believe it was, which beating the All Blacks in those days was no small feat. people, that people weren't beating the All Blacks back then, lads. This is between 2011 and 2015. The best rugby world side ever, in my opinion. Like, the best rugby country ever, also in my opinion. But, like, as in, they were the best team of all time, that All Blacks team. So, I don't know what went wrong there, but England did manage to beat the All Blacks in that test, which will probably be seen as his best victory in his time at England. I mean, he hadn't many others, but let's look at that World Cup. Well, firstly, actually, let's discuss the Six Nations. He finished second in 4 consecutive Six Nations, which just has to be heartbreaking, especially when they lost to Wales in 2013 after beating Ireland away, which is the first time Ireland had beaten England away in quite a while. But losing to Wales 33 was a pretty bad return, when you're going into it potentially being able to win it. But anyway, the 2015 World Cup opening game, they beat Fiji 35-11. Easy work. They then went on to lose to Wales 28-25 in maybe one of the best Rugby World Cup games ever. It's an amazing game. Go and watch it if you haven't seen it before. Wales's performance in that game, top tier, genuinely. Then they lost to Australia 33-13. And this not only meant England were eliminated from the tournament after 3 weeks of matches, but until the final week there was a risk England might not even automatically qualify for the 2019 World Cup. Could you imagine that? If a tier 1 side didn't automatically qualify, that'd be embarrassing. However, after Uruguay's loss to Fiji on the 6th of October and England's third place finish, qualification for 2019 was confirmed. That was wrapped up then, but for a brief time there, England might not have automatically qualified for the 2019 World Cup, which would have been kind of hilarious. But really sad for Lancaster and a sad end to his reign there, but I don't think he was as bad as maybe people make out. But anyway, in 2016, after that horrid World Cup, so Lancaster took about a year out, right? He was then announced he would join the Leinster backroom team with immediate effect. It was thought that the coaching staff for Leinster was complete at the time, but however, Kurt McKilkin, due to a family reason, had to leave, and Lancaster snapped up that opportunity. Now, Lancaster is loved at Leinster. This is seen as his most successful tenure, and if you ask anyone from Leinster who supported Leinster during Lancaster's tenure, they'll tell you they loved him as a coach, they loved him around the province. Everyone did. And I think the players loved him. Actually, we know the players loved him. Many players that he developed in his time in Leinster, or that were younger coming through in Leinster at the time, have nothing but good things to say about Lancaster. He made a really good lasting impact on Leinster, around the county, and obviously, I keep saying around the county, around the province. And I think that's still felt. Well, the magic's going a little bit now with Leinster losing a lot of Champions Cups and stuff recently, but he overseen one Champions Cup, which was victory over Racing 92 in 2018. Obviously, Leo Cullen was the head coach, but Stuart Lancaster, I think, had a lot of hands in making Leinster successful in that time. I think he just really came into his own in Leinster. He got to work on the ground as a coach, and that's what suits him best. I think that's one thing that maybe where Lancaster works best is when he's on the ground, he's with the players, he doesn't have the pressures of the media and stuff around him, which he didn't at Leinster, so he's allowed to blossom. I think that seems to suit Lancaster a lot better. Now, that's not excusing when he was head coaches or anything like that, and he failed at England and he failed at Racing. I'll get on to Racing in a minute, but it just seems when he gets that opportunity to be hands-on with people, he just works a lot better. So, he was also part of the team when they won 4 Pro 12/14 titles, which is, 4. I think it wasn't 4 in a row, but it was 4. That's still 4 titles, lads. That's a lot of titles, So that's 5 to his name. On the 22nd of September 2022, Leinster announced that Lancaster would leave to join French top 14 side Racing for the following season. Now, I think did it come as a shock? Maybe, but also I feel like Lancaster wanted a new opportunity, and clearly, they weren't going to get rid of Cullen, it seemed, at Leinster, which maybe looking back wasn't the greatest call, but anyway, it seemed that as if, he wanted a new challenge in France, and this is maybe, I would say, where Lancaster had his roughest spell, even rougher than England. Racing and Lancaster did not go together well. It didn't blend well. It didn't gel well. I think that's because he couldn't really get a full grip of the culture around France. That and the owner of Racing is a bit of a header. We know that. He's a bit controversial. He's always calling out players and coaches, and it's a bit sad in that way. But anyway, I think the thing with Lancaster and Racing, as I said, he wasn't on the team, he wasn't on the ground with the team. He was the head coach and the head coach only. He didn't get many opportunities to, coach every player one by one, as he had a lot more responsibilities, a lot more games, and the culture in France is very different to the culture in England or Ireland. Look, at England and Ireland have their differences, but the people in general aren't a whole lot different in terms of, well, the rugby anyway isn't a whole lot different in the cultures they play and the sports mentality. It's not 1,000 miles away from each other, and he just seemed to grasp the Irish culture or the Leinster culture very well as the England culture, whereas in France he just couldn't gel with that. And that's why he brought in a good few England players in his time, very short time in Racing. Like, he had his son brought over, which is another controversy. He had his son brought over, he had that young England, he had a few, I think he had 2 under 20 England players brought over. He had a few English players around him there, but unfortunately it just didn't work out, and I think he deserves a good bit of the blame for that too, because the culture was very bad in Racing, and he just couldn't seem to get a grip on it. And on top of that, there was a lot of just very, very poor results for Racing, like very poor. And they were in a relegation battle for a while until he agreed to leave the club on mutual terms, which again was quite sad to see, because I feel like he gave a lot to the team and it just didn't work out. And I think it just became really, really toxic towards the end, which was something I don't think really happened under Lancaster until that point. Because it just seems as if, Lancaster really always got on with the players, but it seemed like there was a total fallout there. There was lots of criticisms, like his selection, especially of his son. His son seemed to be selected in big tests over Owen Farrell. Now, Owen Farrell was injured a lot of the times. Obviously, you can't help that. Still, Dan Lancaster's not a bad player, though. Don't get me wrong, but he's not Owen Farrell, is he? But Owen Farrell also didn't work out at Racing. So maybe it just is a club cultural issue. He picked maybe the wrong club to go into, considering the toxicity, lack of success, and just lack of good feels around in that club. But then he took a brief coaching spell, or a brief trip away from coaching. He was waiting for a new job. Allegedly, he was down to the final 2 to get the new Australia head coach job. He didn't get it. And then it seems he inquired about Connacht. He said he was inspired to come to Connacht after he came to watch his son play at Connacht and Racing 92 in the quarterfinals of the Challenge Cup this season. Pain. Absolute pain, by the way. But Racing beat us 43-40. Just shows how poor the defence of both sides are there, really. But anyway, he came to watch that game, and after that, he's decided, he's seen Connacht, he's seen the county Galway, and he was like, you know what, I really miss this, and I wouldn't be, he wouldn't be mad at coming back to Ireland. And honestly, I don't know what voodoo magic Willie Ruan pulled off to get Lancaster here, but I couldn't be more grateful. And neither can the people of Connacht. Now, I think I'm going to get into now, in the last segment of the podcast, what he can do for Connacht Rugby and what I hope he will do for Connacht Rugby. Of course, the biggest thing I think that Lancaster can achieve in even a 2-year contract is mentality. Connacht's biggest issue stems from solely mentality. We have the talent, we have the players to do better than a 13th place finish in the URC. We should be getting top 8. This is not bias, this is just objective. We do have good players, but the mentality is terrible. To be fair, the mentality has not been good for a while now, but just under Pete Wilkins, it just seemed to have lopsided completely. Like, the heads go down the second that Connacht, concede a try, or the second that they score something, they just can't keep the momentum up. And yes, they always seem to have come back into games that were badly losing, but they shouldn't have been in those positions in general. And Lancaster said he already thinks he can get 30-40% more out of these players, which would be enough. That would 100% be enough to get better results and be on the good side of close results, or results we should have gotten. Like, we might even win an Interborough at this rate. I just don't... I don't know, it's just... Lancaster, for me, just fits so well at Connacht. He just works well with young squads, and we've one of the youngest squads in the URC. It just seems like a match made in heaven. Now, I hope the fact that Billy Millard will be handling a lot of the more behind the scenes work of being a head coach, the more admin work, like they'll be kind of sharing the administration roles, as Stuart Lancaster said himself. So that takes a lot of the pressure off that he would have had at England and at Racing, where he did infamously fail at both, as I've said. I think he suits better if he is just a head coach rather than, director of rugby, which he is the director of rugby and head coach. But I think it suits better if he is just the head coach and works on the players, works with the players, develops them. I think he's going to work really well there. I think the likes of Finn Tracy, right, who are just new from the academy, Afiq Barrett coming through the academy, Sean Nocton, Harry West, all these lads just about to graduate the academy, and even lads that, are just out of the academy, like a Matthew Devine or Finn Tracy, as I previously mentioned. Even younger lads like the Murray brothers, Dara in particular. I mean, Jack Onger isn't that young, but, that 20 to 25-year-old bracket, he can really work on those lads and get them to another level, or at least try and help them get to another level. And I could really see him succeed in that way at Connacht, because that's what a lot of these players need. Even like the likes of Shea Mullins, or players that are being zoned out. Sam Illo, another one, Temi Lasisi. There's players that we didn't see much the last 2 years because for some reason Wilkins just didn't give them a shot, at all, really. Some other ones as well, of course. There's... who else do we have that just you don't see a lot? Like a David O'Connor, he's a bit older. Or like Colin Riley when he comes back from injury, the great scrum half. I think just Lancaster will work of getting these players to the next step so they could be starting for us. I think that's the kind of method he will do. And he's also focusing on the academy, he said. And he's working on trying to get a bigger connection around the province to the players and to the team. He said he wants to make open training sessions available in different counties, not just in Galway. And that's amazing. I think that's exactly what Connacht need. They need more support for this new stadium they're opening. But the announcement of Lancaster alone has sold so many more season tickets so much quicker. It's great to see. Like, everyone knows that Stuart Lancaster is high profile, and genuinely, it's Connacht's biggest signing ever. Yes, the head coach is the biggest signing Connacht they've ever had, but it's what we need, and it just shows the ambition that, Willie Ruran and that, those more administrative people behind the scenes and shareholders have for Connacht, because we know the potential's there. There's fire in the bellies of these players. It's just that fire keeps getting stamped out by poor results and poor coaching. And I think I think the likes of Rob Sieb coming in will be great as well, because we are losing Andrew Sexton to Ulster. Sieb will come in, he'll have a new attack, a new slate, and we have great attacking players. It's the defence that needs to sharpen up. And Lancaster is also working on defence, which will be interesting. I think he will get a lot more defensive work out of these players, and he'll get them, to cop on a bit in a lot of high key moments where they need to defend better, because that is where Connacht lose a lot of games, defensively. Defence. I'm blue in the face saying it, and I'm sure the coaches are too, but the fact of the matter is that the defensive coaches we've had, the last couple of them, just have not been good enough, It just seems like they just aren't doing their job correctly, because you see the way Connacht defend, it looks desperate a lot of the time. Like Scott Fairdy, exceptional player. As a coach, he really did not impress me. He didn't impress people around the county, around the province. He didn't impress the players, I'd imagine. And there was just a toxic environment towards the end. Wilkins left because of it. Well, we don't know if it's because of the toxicity around it, but realistically it probably is. I'm not saying Wilkins didn't get a fair shake. He did get a fair shake, but it just didn't work out. And that's just the truth about it sometimes. Wilkins, similar to Lancaster, he'd probably work better, behind the scenes, he was great for Connacht when he was just the head coach and not the director of rugby. He's now an attack coach at Benetton, which I think will work out a lot better. I think he'll be a lot better as an on-the-ground coach, and I wish the best for him. Ferdy, I don't know. Ferdy's gone to the AIL, I think, which is probably his level at the minute. We're keeping Muldoon, and we are keeping Colm Riley, which is great, because I think Colm Riley, he couldn't do much as an interim coach. That's not his job. He was a scrum coach mainly, and I think he does that job very well. Our scrum rarely struggles. I think it's actually quite good, our scrum, and again, that just shows the foundations are there. The foundations of Connacht are there. We just need someone to help us get that next step up, like just to get right over the line when we need to. And I think Lancaster might be the best in the world at trying to get us to do that, or the best coach that we could get. I mean, he seemed out of reach when it was announced. I genuinely was dumbfounded. I could not believe it. I think he's just going to bring a lot of positivity to Connacht. And even if he doesn't achieve much in his time here, as I said, I think mentality is the main thing he can change in a short, span of time, as well as bring through a lot of these younger players and bring them to the first team. Because we do have a lot of older players that don't have much longer in them. Bundyaki, obviously, is the main one. Dennis Buckley, Dave Heffernan, Julian Holloran, of course, retired last year. Then we have the likes of Blade isn't that old, but he's still getting up there, we have, who else do we have that's hanging around there? Finlay Bealham, of course. How did I nearly forget Bealham? There's a lot of players there that, maybe there's not much left in the tank, and these younger players will have to step up. And I think they will. I will say, though, if you're going to bring back an old player, bring back Jared Butler. Genuinely, why is he sitting in Galway doing nothing? Why was he not given a contract? We needed his leadership last year, but I'm ranting about a different issue now. But another thing Lancaster could definitely bring is signings. He knows those Leinster boys well. He knows that a Leinster academy well. The likes of a Max Deegan, or, players that aren't looking at Leinster week in, week out, like even a Jordan Larmer now. That kind of player. We don't need any more backs, but we need a few powerful forwards. That's what Connacht's missing, really, like a powerful back row. We have Prendergast and the likes of that, but we need a real powerhouse, I think. Maybe a powerhouse lock. We just need a few more consistent forwards, and other than that, I think we'll be absolutely fine. As long as Gilbert works out. I couldn't remember his name there for a second. Our new signing, I really hope he works out, because he is the key to it all. He is a great player, and he looks like a very good fullback when I have seen him play, which is what Connacht need. We genuinely lacked a fullback last year. No one really put their hands up. Oh, another player that Lancaster couldn't develop, Shane Jennings. Why couldn't I remember Jennings? Lots, there's ounces and ounces that ooze from him in terms of potential. Like, Jennings just can be, I want to say world class, but he can be an exceptional player, but he just needs the right guidance. And the likes of Lancaster could definitely do that for him. So yeah, I think I'll leave the podcast kind of there, or I'll wrap up now, because I think I've said all I can. I've went through the history of Lancaster and what I think he can do for Connacht. Now, to answer one last question, do I think he can be a success at Connacht? 100%. I think he has the potential to be the best coach we've had since Pat Lam. We already know he has the raw chops, he is the best on paper, and I think he will 100% transform this team. I'm hopeful he will. If he doesn't, then who will? That's the way I'm thinking about it. But yeah, if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to follow me over on TikTok, X, and Instagram at Merrick Talks Rugby. That is the name of the account, Merrick Talks Rugby. Make sure to follow me on there, and also to follow this podcast wherever you're listening to it. It's probably on Spotify or YouTube. But if it is somewhere else, make sure to follow me on there. Give me some criticism or give me some positive feedback, whatever. I'm not new to this, but this is a new podcast, so I'll still be tinkering out some issues. I know this is a very different podcast to what it was last week, but that's the way it's going to be. It's going to be a mix and match each week. Sometimes I'll be going through games. Sometimes I'll be going through events. Sometimes I'll be going through people like Lancaster here. So yeah, thank you guys for listening, and goodbye.